Okay. I wanted to share with you something here just to kind of kick off the conversation. Drag it over to this screen and share mine. Okay, so I'll make this full screen. So this is just some data I pulled this morning. If you're not familiar with this, this is, just looking at the MLS data. Typically, when we first log in on utahrealestate.com, right, you have the market statistics area. I hope you guys utilize that. I mean, it takes all of 30 seconds and you're kind of spun up on some of the key pieces of data on a very regular basis. And so I was just kind of curious, one of the things I do is I go check inventory. We're sitting at 11,200 and change, which is higher than it's been in a year or two, but it's still not quite to normal levels, as we would call it. And so kind of with that as a backdrop, I wanted to look, I'll zoom in on this, make it a little bigger. Whoop, ayo. What is it currently translating to? So across the top, you can see the last 4 months worth of data, right? August 23rd to September 23rd and backwards, and the number of sales. And so, 4 months ago, in that 30-day window, we had 3,500. We had another 3,500. We had a little bit of a blip in July, the end of July, the first part of August, 3,600. And from August to September, we dropped, what's my drop here? I wrote these down, my handy dandy sticky note. So in 2024, from May to the first month to the last month, we dropped 26% by way of sales. And I can hear you all now going, who cares? So what? What does it mean, Matt? If I go and I look at 2019, which was the most recent normal year, can I say it that way? The non-COVID year after COVID burst and last 2 years of kind of a downturn. What did it look like? Well, we were at 4,900 and we dropped in that same time period to 4,500, which basically a 9% drop. So let me put this back up on screen. What, as practitioners, what do you take away from that? What does it mean? I'm not going to give you the answer. I want to hear your thoughts. And
So I
D,
think it's, a little bit cyclical. Good morning, Matt.
good morning, Dan.
I think it's a little bit cyclical, but it's also is it a little more than cyclical? If we look at raw numbers, like yeah, we're kind of down a similar like total, but at the same time, it's like closer to 25% than 10%.
Yeah.
So, I think my narrative, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that the Fed circled a day on the map and said, this is when we'll drop rates. And buyers are like, cool, I'll wait till then.
Yep.
So I think all of the above, right? A little bit cyclical, end of August, beginning of September. We always have to remind ourselves is just everything goes quiet. And then you add to that election, you add to that interest rate drops, you add to that all the external factors. And yeah, we are down a little bit in sales.
Yeah.
So some of this, should have been, we should have known it, but it is down more than typical. So maybe it's all those things together.
I think you're right, and I'm not trying to dodge a more specific answer. I really do think that is the case. I mean, we've had, especially in the last 12 months, with the Fed rate game versus pricing not correcting the way we thought versus an election year. Yeah, there is a lot of what shall we officially call it, fence sitting, and it's been going on for a while. And I think specifically this month, right? It was especially so because it's like, what's the Fed going to do? What's the Fed going to do? They're finally going to make a move. Everybody realizes that this rate cut by the Fed is the first time in a couple of years, right? A couple of years. And so I think there was some hanging on going on here. And remember, this goes through September 23rd, and the Fed just announced their rate change on the 19th. So we haven't seen the numbers through. The reason I want to show you guys this, just to start off, is somebody could have, with bad intentions or I don't know, whatever, could have played these numbers totally different in this discussion, right? And oh my gosh, the market's crappy, blah, blah, blah. It's not. In fact, I would make the case just the opposite. It's what I've been saying for the past 2 months is this is the 1 year you want to stay engaged. I promise you, this is the 1 year you want to stay engaged. This number right here, this 2832, that is what we would call you're rapidly going to see it as a statistical anomaly. With the rates coming back a half a point on the most recent announcement, which kind of surprised people. Everybody was banking on a quarter point. There was obviously some probability of a half a point comeback, and that's what happened, but people weren't really banking on that. Okay. What I also wanted to show you with that is, where am I here? I have way too many windows open. Let me drag this over here. I use this in our sales meeting. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but basically I did 4 slides. I said, you need to learn this dialogue for the next 6 months, if not for your whole career, but especially in the next 6 months. Wealth building, owners versus renters is phenomenal. And I get it. There's all little tangent arguments there, but by and large, most financial people don't disagree with this is the biggest way for the average person to increase their wealth, their net income, and we should be proponents of that. The second one, oh, I'm going to mute that. The second one was just basically that the resold homes are at 30-year lows, and there's a lot of pent-up demand. And oh, by the way, there's 70 million more people than there were 30 years ago. So that adds to the demand that's in the pipe. And then this one, I hope you guys, if you didn't take a screenshot of it or you didn't make it into sales meetings, take a screenshot right now as this is on your screen. These are some of the points. If I was practicing real estate on a day-to-day basis, I'd make sure I knew these, or at least a handful of them, when somebody asks either a buyer or a seller. I can use this data for both of them, but like, listen, over the last 2 years, here's what's taken place that has not been reflected in home sales. So it's pent up, right? And rattle off 7 million babies born, 3 million marriages, 1.5 million divorces, 7 million people turn 65, and understand what that means. It's not just downsizing, it's also buying investment properties, to leave behind for your kids. 4 million deaths, 6 million new net jobs, and 50 million job switches. That is a lot of freaking demand built up. And when rates get better, oh, wait a minute, they just got better. You're going to be at the front end of a burst of activity. Okay. And then I showed you this. It's the Chicago Mercantile Exchange tracking of the Fed rate. And this is dated. This moves daily, just so you guys know. But prior to the Fed announcement, they were saying, hey, there's a 71% chance of a quarter point drop and a 29% chance of, I'm looking at this top row, right here, of a half a point. And then they were saying by the November 7th, there will be 86% chance of being down 3/4 of a point total from where we are today. All right, so what does that mean? I am going to show you. Here is the latest as of this morning. So the next meeting is November 7th, and they're saying there's a 47% chance we're going to go down another half a point. There's a 53% chance we'll go down a quarter point. And then by December 18th, right, there's a 97% chance we'll be down another quarter point. And look into January. So listen, I don't know if you have or haven't been in the business for a long time, but when you see that number of rate drops in succession and the high probability of them coming down the pike, this is why I'm like harping on everybody. Please, please, please don't disengage for the next 6 months. Work with buyers. The inventory pool is going to start shrinking over the next 2 to 3 months, and need to make sure that you do right by your buyers and share with them the key data to get them into a property while rates are good and inventory is still plentiful, and they still have some negotiation power, because that is going to go away shortly. Okay. That's just your little statistical bump today. So what I wanted to spend the majority of our time with today or on was, no, we're not going to talk about the national settlement. We'll have a Q&A at the end if you have some additional extraneous things tied to the national settlement and weird things that you've seen in the market. Actually, really would like to hear those. But I wanted to come back to more of a regular curriculum today, which is just, I guess it's kind of tangent because it has to do with lawsuits and some of the things that are the most frequent. If I were to ask you, what are the most common things we get sued for or get tied up in a lawsuit for, what would be your top three? I'm just going to sit here quiet until somebody responds.
Hey, repeat that question, would you, Matt? Sorry.
What are the top three things that real estate industry professionals and or their clients get sued for? Go ahead, D.
Non-disclosure.
Disclosures.
Non-disclosure is top of the heap. What's another one?
Negligence.
Say it again.
Negligence.
Pretty broad category, Dan. Can you pin that down a little bit?
I don't think so.
Fiduciaries? Dropping your fiduciaries, breaching your fiduciaries? What about fair housing? Right? It's actually pretty prominent, pretty common. I was driving back from Lake Tahoe through the wonderful I-80 through Nevada, and you find yourself a little bored, and so you actually start reading billboards. And I didn't do an official count, but it seemed like 30 to 40% of the billboards were by attorneys for different avenues for suing people, right? And our industry is no different. They are out there looking for opportunities, and fair housing is well established because it's not only a federal regulation, it's also a state regulation. So, quick little trivia quiz before I put this on screen. What are the protected classes? Start naming them. I'm going to go down the list. Mackenzie, what is one of the protected classes under fair housing? What can I not discriminate on?
Gender.
Gender.
Okay.
Gender? You and I can't. Okay, we'll leave that one alone. Kayla, what's another protected class?
Race.
Race, okay. Savannah's pretending to be on the phone right now. Dan, you've
Source
already.
of income.
Say that again, James.
Source of income.
Okay, financial status. Okay, what else you got?
Religion.
Religion. Yes. Okay. Missing a big one.
Ethnicity.
Ethnicity, race. Okay. What about your marriage status or familial status? Whether you're married or have kids or don't have kids or, right? And clearly nobody has ever gotten involved with the ADA, American Disabilities Act. Disabilities, people with disabilities are a protected class. And trust me, as a landlord, you become highly aware of things like that. Anybody heard of a service dog versus a, what do they call it? A pet? I mean, sorry, a
Emotional support.
emotional support animal. Yes, sorry. There's a lot of things to be aware of, and I don't want to go down, too many rabbit holes with different things, but I wanted to make sure we heard those, and I'm going to pull this over on screen here so we can be looking at it as we chat. Share screen. Wow. This is from the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. government, which, by the way, freaky thing, I've never seen this. I'm driving down I-15 on my way home last night, and I saw a federal police car. Have you ever seen a federal police car? It has nothing to do with our discussion today, but just thought that was entertaining. Okay, so race, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and then I'm going to drag something else over here. This is from NAR, right? And it's talking about this, and it's interesting because they introduce, if you were paying attention, what is the new article in the Code of Ethics? Anybody out new, relatively new? So right here in this paragraph, it says, hey, attempts to induce a person to sell or rent a dwelling by referring to the prospective entry of persons of a particular race, color, sex, religion, national origin, handicap, or familial status, in addition to prohibiting specific practices involving the sale of rentals or dwellings. The Fair Housing Act also prohibits redlining. Dan, you were a former lender. What's redlining?
Redlining is when you circle a certain neighborhood and say they can or can't
Yeah,
lend
your
them
type of people, whether that's religion, race, familial status, financial, this is where you fit, right? All of a sudden you become a social engineer of sorts, and that is highly frowned upon, against the law, et cetera, et cetera. But here's an interesting thing when it comes to NAR's position on these things. I don't know how I feel about it, so I'm going to keep it agnostic. I can see some of the benefits from it, but I also wonder why our trade organization is kind of falling into this category. But they basically say, not only can you not do these things, and it included LGBTQT, or did I get that alphabet soup right? Not just in your professional career, but if you were to post anything on social media, you can be sanctioned on that. And the worst consequences of that is no longer being able to be a realtor. So they've gone an extra step with that. And, you know, I wish we could all just be good actors and have a brain and not do stupid things. But I guess they have to put some things in place that they think are, you know, important that most people can't figure out. But the whole point is, whether it's the federal Fair Housing Act or Utah's Fair Housing Act, yes, there is a state version of this, or the NAR's Code of Ethics, this is a big deal, and we need to pay attention to it. And so what I wanted to do today was kind of go through a structure. I found this, let's see if I've got this here. I know I do. There it is. And I will, you guys aren't seeing this, right? Let me see. Share screen. Believe it or not, this came out of Rhode Island. I went through a lot of different material on this, and I kind of like their format, but it kind of drove home some points. But I wanted to start it off by just asking a couple of questions related to this, right? So if we understand that this is an area of litigation, that we should actually have this dialed in, just being good human beings or whatever. What happens though when rubber meets the road, right? So, oh gosh, who can I pick on here? Courtney, you're new to our group, and I'm gonna take a little license here. Please don't be mad at me. But if one of your clients came and it's a listing, and a buyer's coming, and they said to you, "Hey, so you know, what religion are the buyers?" Or what, I mean, are they, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out here because I've heard these in my occupation, right? Are they Hispanic? Because now notice I didn't really say anything. It was kind of facially driven and just kind of tone. But how do we handle that? Courtney, you're a pro. How would you handle somebody asking a question in that category? Okay, Courtney's ignoring me. Jeff, can I throw that question at you?
Can you hear me now, Matt?
Oh, there you are, Courtney. I can hear you now. Go ahead.
I honestly, I don't know the correct way to answer that, other than just telling them that I don't even know. I don't know the correct way to word that. I wouldn't answer their question. I mean, I would tell them, I don't
Yeah,
know.
you know
I'd
what?
love to hear how somebody else would answer that because I wouldn't give them that information, but I don't know the best way to word it.
Fair. And I appreciate your honesty because as I've talked to several agents about this, your response is pretty typical, no offense. It's
Okay.
kind of like, well, gosh, I know I shouldn't do that, but I'm not sure how I would handle it. That's a really awkward situation. And
Yes.
hopefully by the time we're done today, we have a little better idea of how to handle that,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
And I
So
love the
Matt,
fact
I would just say, I don't know, and then I would go into the fair housing.
yeah, yeah, and we're gonna touch on all of those things. So I wanted Courtney to have a minute of vulnerability there because I know you all are kind of feeling it like, oh crap, either you have had this or you could see it happening. And it's
Matt,
yeah, go ahead, Jashelle.
couldn't you just keep it really simple and say that's really irrelevant? That's how I would say it.
Okay, you know what? And a lot of this is going to depend on who our client is, who we're talking to, what their personality is. I think for a driver type, yeah, that's irrelevant. You know, I'm focused on getting you a good deal. Dan.
So I had this over the weekend. Somebody asked me, like they're like, well, I don't know if you're LDS or not, but do you know when the ward meets? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if I am or not, but I could certainly find out for you, you know? So like, are we not supposed to address the subject at all? Or if somebody asks us a question that we can find out about, like, what time does the local synagogue meet? Like, can't we just look that up for them? Or do we just say like, I don't know, like, I can't talk to you about that?
What time is mass? What time is, yeah, there's a lot. I love this because this is the real world.
Right.
And that we're just hitting right now the religion side of things. It's sometimes it's socioeconomic, right? Sometimes it can be race. Sometimes it's like, well, will they fit in? Do they have a boat? Yeah, it's just stupid stuff like that. Are they married? Are they gay? Are they? I mean, trust me, it runs the spectrum, and it's important for us to have these conversations here in this forum so we get to exactly what Courtney said. I know I won't answer that question. I just need to handle it as
Didn't
effectively.
you listen, look at my text? I
Sorry,
told
Bill,
you
I'm
I
gonna
had a
mute you.
meeting.
Okay, so let's jump into this. We'll use this as kind of a guideline. It's not terribly long, but I like some of the content here. So I highlighted some of the key areas, right? How to handle challenging fair housing questions, right? What would you do if a client, customer, real estate licensee, or tester, and it could be your peers, by the way, guys, right? Ask you for information that can lead to a violation of fair housing. Fair housing laws exist, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go down to here for some examples, right? I highlighted this one. How many of you have received the emotional letter? Whether you're on the listing side or your buyer wants to, hey, can we include a picture of my family and tell them how lovely we are? And we know what time the ward meets, Dan. We've already been there. Okay. I highlighted this for a reason. We can't present letters and photographs from buyers that reveal their marital status, familial status, sexual orientation, race, or other protected classes. Okay, so let's stop there for a minute. Either you're on the listing side and somebody sends over an offer with this attached, how are you going to handle that? Or if your buyer says, I really want this house, and I think if they see my family, I just know it's going to carry the day, right? And so in theory, well, we can't do that. All right, well, that's not what we get to deal with, right? Because on the one hand, they're our client and we have this, well, wait a minute, don't we have a fiduciary of obedience? Are they asking us to do anything illegal? What's the answer here? Yeah, there is a law.
Yes, it's illegal.
That's right. There is a law in place. Now, how do we actually address it, right? We know that we can't do it. We shouldn't do it. We won't do it. But if Jashelle, if your buyer says, Jashelle, you're just so wonderful and you got a great personality, can you just send this letter over? It's got a picture of our family. What do you actually say?
Sorry, I had to unmute. It's just really simple. Say, you know what, we actually are not allowed to do that as realtors. It's a regulation that's been put in place, and it puts the seller in a very awkward position because it doesn't allow them to be fair across the board to anybody who's trying to make an offer on this property. So sadly, I know you think that that would be an ideal situation and maybe help, but it's really not even something that I'm allowed to do.
Oh, man, that's awesome. And I think you touched on a point there that I want to make sure everybody heard. I'm going to put a little more flesh on it. If Giselle, if you were my buyer and asked me to send that, I'd be like, oh, Giselle, I totally get it. I love this house too. And we're going to do everything we can for you to get that house. But can I just tell you something that might be counterintuitive? Right? Most, in the past, people have done this, but in a litigious era, which we're now in, if we send that over, there's a high probability that the listing agent, being aware of that, won't even present your offer because it is a violation of fair housing law, right? To make an offer somehow contingent or tainted by one of the protected classes. So I know it seems like you're doing something that's going to help. It can actually be very detrimental to your offer. How did that just change the tone?
That's so much better.
Well, the point is our job is to be the Sherpa. We're guiding them up the mountain to, find, get their transaction done. And you rely on your Sherpa to take the best path to avoid pitfalls, that's exactly what we're doing. But you've got to always make sure you bring it back into, this is the point I want to drive home. What's in it for them? Yes, we as professionals can't do it. The law tells us we can't do it. But if the magic happens when we can take what is factual and flip it into a what's in it for them, right? Always look for how to take the content and flip it into what's in it for them. In this case, it's like, hey, you want your offer to get seen? You want your offer to get accepted? Don't do crazy A stuff like that that's going to make them dismiss it out of hand because they don't want to be involved in a lawsuit. Now, I wouldn't say it that way, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah, go ahead.
In addition, I tell people, I mean, there were years that this was, several years ago, this was really common, and I think probably changed when offers were accepted on multiple occasions. But what I tell people when that comes up now is that there's a really good chance that either the seller or the agent view it as manipulative, and not only just fair housing issues, but that they're gonna it's going to create a negative impression. So I think that's an additional thing that isn't just a legal issue. It's do they view that we're trying to manipulate them? And that's not of benefit to the buyer.
Yeah. James, you bring up such a good point. I mean, listen, here we are in our state of Utah, whatever the makeup of our state is, there are some predominant this, that, and the others. And by introducing a variable, a very specific targeted variable, whether it's whatever the protected classes, it really can go backwards. I mean, I'm going to use the example of, oh, yes, would you present a picture of my family because it just feels like a family neighborhood? Well, what if the people are single, or they, that they don't fit into the predominant norm? They're like, I am not going to be roped into somebody else's view of this. There's all kinds of psychological factors. I'm talking outside of the legal, just even the psychological factors of it. Why introduce variables that you don't need to? Right. And again, our point is to try and help them understand that, especially in the context of what's in it for them. And I think articulating either the psychological factors or, just the sheer running scared from a lawsuit, so therefore your offer wouldn't even presented. Those are great points to keep in mind. Okay, so here are some possible situations that I should do it like this so you guys can't see. Which communities have good schools? Is this, I mean, it seems pretty tame, right? Shouldn't we be able to answer that? Yeah, the schools here, they turn out a lot of, kids that get scholarships to higher education. Isn't that something we should be able to share? Is that protected? All right. Look at some of these responses here, right? What I like how they do this too, right? Because building rapport, building a relationship, rather than just throwing it back in somebody's face. I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. The law is if we ask questions, rapport almost always goes up. If we ask intelligent, meaningful questions like, hey, so what do you mean by a good school? Right? I can't refer you to specific schools, but you can check out the websites, right? You can redirect them to the Nebo School District, the Alpine School District, the Scott. So whatever your local school district is, don't you be the source of information. Refer them to sources of information, and that can be done, right? What if somebody said, hey, is there a lot of crime in the area? I think this might be further down on the list, but let's go with that one. Is this a crime? Is this a area with a lot of crime? How do you answer that one?
Well, just tell them to watch the news.
Just watch the news. Just watch the news. I know this seems kind of nerdy and geeky, but they can reach out to their local police department. They can reach out to the state for crime statistics. They can go to the FBI website for all kinds of crime statistics, and they will break that down quite often into a county and if not a city level. But the whole point is, don't you go do the research and say, oh, I'm the one that's in the know now. Let me tell you, this west side of such and such city is horrible. The crime's double there. Yeah, you're on very shaky ground there. All right, let's go to the second one. What kind of people are selling this property? Wow. It looks like the sellers are fill in the blank. How do you answer that one, James? What kind of people are selling this property?
Well, it looks like they're people that take good care of a home.
Hey, yo, I like that one. And if I'm the obstinate client or yours and I say something like, yeah, it does look like it's well taken, but what are the people like?
I haven't met them. I don't know. One of the things I would always say, I would never start with, I can't anything. I think if you're asked for information, I think it's really easy to first direct them to just know the websites, know where they can go to get education information, know where they can go to get the police blotter, get calls by zip code or whatever, but have information and you can finish it up with that's information that falls within fair housing, so we can't get into that. But I would always start with something positive, which is here's where you can get information. I never want to start with kind of getting defensive or making it seem like I'm not trying to help and say, oh, I can't tell you that.
Totally like that. I agree with that. We're supposed to be glue when people ask us what I do for a living as a realtor, working with buyers and sellers. One of my common responses is, oh, I'm glue, right? It's kind of comical, but it also kind of describes what we do. We hold things together. We bring things together. We don't, tend to break things apart. Well, let's see what they say here, right? Recommended response, why do you ask? Now, you got to be careful with how you say that because, man, that can come off really poorly. But if it's just like, I'm not sure, what's the concern? That's the same way of saying the same thing. What are you looking for, right? As I explained earlier, now, James, this is your point, right? This would come at the tail end. I can't help you with that. Why do you ask? They're very straightforward, but look at the tip here. Encourage sellers to depersonalize their home by removing personal photographs. Now they're talking about the seller side here, but I would say on the buyer side too, I'd say, like, you know what? And I loved your first response, James. You know what? I have no idea. I've never met the sellers. I never met them. But man, it looks like they take good care of the property and it looks like a really great neighborhood. The park's right down the street. You kind of redirect the focus to the things that really are going to matter to them, right? And I think keeping at least part of the eye on the financial picture, right? It looks like a neighborhood that is well maintained. It looks like it's going to hold its value well, if not, appreciate substantially. It looks like there's a new development going in across the street, which is probably going to drive up the prices. I'm going to try and redirect them off of anything that is not is inappropriate for fair housing. And if they persist, then eventually, James, you're right. We're going to have to get to a point where it's like, hey, listen, I get it. This is a big purchase. Always have some empathy. You don't have to buy into violating fair housing and at the exclusion of being empathetic. I could totally say, James, you know what? I really appreciate those questions. And I get it. This is something important to you. And I will redirect you to whatever sources of information I can get my hands on. But I just need you to know at the end of the day, as a real estate practitioner, there's federal housing guidelines, fair housing guidelines, state, et cetera, et cetera. I just can't violate those things. So if you're asking questions specific about, and I may even use a teaser, race, sex, religion, things like that, just know in advance, I really can't answer those questions. The best I'll be able to do is direct you to some sources of information and then finish with this. Fair enough? Right? There's an old Mike Ferry line. Anytime you're dealing with something and you've provided a solution, get their buy-in. You want them to nod their head. Fair enough, James? What's he going to say to that if he's a decent, rational person? Yeah, I get it. Fair enough. Right?
No,
And then
Matt, I always, one of my go-tos is I always tell them to take a Sunday afternoon and wander the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors.
Yeah.
They almost never do it, but they realize that that's an obvious source of information, and it kind of lets me off the hook.
yeah. Again, nobody's trying to get rid of being helpful, but if it crosses the threshold of fair housing, yes, we need to beg off. We need to say, sorry, can't go there, but I can be very helpful in a lot of other ways. Okay, what are the buyers like? This is a similar one to the sellers, right? What are the buyers like? They look like they are fill in the blank. I love this line. I don't know. All I know is they're pre-approved and you're not going to be living here anymore. So does it really matter? You know, they're cash buyers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Let's go down here to this one. Is this a safe neighborhood? So this is the crime one. We've kind of touched on this. You know what? Listen, I don't know because I don't live in the neighborhood and I wouldn't want to mislead you. And not only that, I really can't, state things on those lines, but here's what you can do. I do have the number for the local police department. You can check with them and see what their take is on it. I did see, there's signs in the neighborhood. Looks like they're highly organized. It looks like it's, a safe neighborhood, but that's something you have to determine, right? I love this one. Drive around the area at night and see if you feel comfortable. I don't know if that would be a go-to line of mine. Oh my gosh. All right. Got to rattle through these really quickly here. What kind of people live in this neighborhood? That one's self-explanatory. This is a big one here in Utah. Is this a family neighborhood? Is this a family neighborhood? I mean, gosh, it's like such low-hanging fruit. I've watched agents do this. Oh yeah, I see all kinds of kids. Ooh, that seems pretty harmless on the surface, but is it? No, you're now doing the very act of steering and utilizing a protected class, familial status. And you just kind of jumped off a little bit of a cliff there. So in the category being helpful, I'm going to share with you guys something. Let me pull this up real quick. Just a second. This would be a good one to share with people. All right, here we go. Mostly because it's going to baffle them with data if they ask inappropriate questions. But I'm dragging this over here. This is a site I ran across years ago. And it's all based on the census data. If you look at it, the URL is statisticalatlas.com. Pretty easy to remember, statisticalatlas.com. And the cool thing is I can go in here and I can find financial information on Utah. I can break it down by state. And when I go into the state of Utah, I can start breaking it down into counties and cities, and it will give me ethnicities. It will give me financial information. It has occupations, how many people are on food stamps. Guess what? I am not the source of information, right? And this is census data from the government. It's not quote unquote biased. It's gathered by the census. And so they can come here and, if they want and say, okay, so race and ethnicity in a particular area. Well, here's the typical makeup, in Utah, predominantly white, Caucasian, Hispanic, Asia. The point is, I'm not using any of this information. First of all, I'm not the source of the information. I just said, I don't know, but a great website I ran across from the government based on census data is here. Am I safe doing that? Yes, I am. I am not.
Just a thought. Why do I want to give someone information that is going to facilitate their racism or whatever? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So let me, it's a fair point, James. I'm not, okay. So let's say.
Got him in a pickle, James.
Shut up, Andy. No, household income. Let's use something that's a little less abrasive. Nobody on this call is advocating for, and it's a fair point. I guess what I was trying to say is if somebody is persistent and says, well, you should be my realtor, you should be helping me. And we tell them the whole fair housing line and this, that, and the other. And but is there not anywhere I can go for data? Yeah. I mean, you can go to the FBI if you want crime stats. I actually ran across this site, which is all of the census data put into meaningful forms. I'm not telling them what to do with the data. They are who they are and they get to make their choices. I'm not advocating for them. I'm like, hey, by the way, click on the race and ethnicity tab. It's a killer. You know what I mean? I'm actually hoping they go here. First of all, I'm not in jeopardy by telling them to go to this site. This is government data. There's no steering within the data. It breaks things down by categories as determined through the census data. And I'm hoping that they go here and get overwhelmed. If you believe the breakdown of personality types, the analyticals represent about 11% of the population. Everybody else will get to this page and they might sit there for 3 to 5 seconds and then they're going to see charts and graphs and like ick, I'm out. And we're no longer going to have these conversations. 11% of the people are going to be like, oh, cool, interesting. I'm going to look at employment status and I'm going to look at occupations and that's helpful. I mean, occupations, if I'm moving into an area and I'm an orthodontist and I want to, figure out if it's an area that's overrun with orthodontists, that's helpful information. My point is, and this will be reemphasized in this workbook, is never be the source of information. Always refer to somebody else when it comes to the protected classes. Okay, so family neighborhood, I don't know. Here's a wonderful site. It actually has a breakdown on finances and familial status. That's just not something I do track, nor could I track if I wanted to, based on fair housing class. All right. This one's predominantly for renters. Hey, do you have a lot of Section 8 renters, or is this any of you in the school realm of things? What's the schools that take a lot of lower income individuals? Is it Title something?
Title I.
Title I. My daughter, Nicole, when she was teaching school, taught at one of those. She had actually a great experience. But any questions like that, won't take Section 8 on rent, or, hey, are there a lot of, is this a Title I school? Man, steer clear of those. Steer clear of those. All right, let's finish up with these. I'm looking for a diverse neighborhood. Good for you. I don't know what that means, nor could I tell you or help you other than I can direct you to census data. That's the best I can do for you. Okay. And then this is a big one. We actually just had one down in southern Utah. A lady bought a house. Our agent did a great job. Let me just start off with that. He did a fantastic job. But this lady was out of state. She'd bought a house in the past 12 months in another state, if I'm not mistaken. So she's not like naive to the process. Apparently, she has a veteran son who's a double amputee and is mostly wheelchair bound. Our agent didn't know that, other than she said that she had a handicapped son, and she had got interested in a property there, and she wanted to buy it without actually setting foot on the property. Anybody seeing any red flags right away? Our agent did, and he went the extra step. He's like, hey, listen, I know that you mentioned, this is an issue. I want to let you know I'm going to actually even send you some video, since you're not going to come down and visit the property. Our contract's very clear, right? In section 8, the due diligence, the responsibility is squarely on the shoulders of the buyer, right? It's a buyer responsibility. It's not a buyer's agent responsibility. I want to make this distinction. So he did. He took photos and sent video of, the driveway, which has some slope. Well, here we are. She forewent her due diligence, ended up signing on the property, and now has filed a small claims lawsuit against us. Because the driveway was steeper than she would like for her son. And I get it. Nobody's insensitive to that, but it's also, you have to balance that against, you had contractual rights in the REPC to go and verify these things. Our agent went the extra step to point out some potential issues. And if you choose to go forward beyond that, that is on you. And by the way, we had a home inspector come out as well, because she didn't want to do a home inspection. We advised her to do that as well. A lot of things. And I'm just sharing this with you so you can understand the craziness that can take place. Our agent did literally like everything right. And yet you still find yourself in a lawsuit. So that's the unfortunate thing. Go ahead, Dee.
I have a question on that, on home inspections. If you recommend getting a home inspection during your due diligence timeframe and they decline that, do you want any type of paperwork or signing off on that?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Dee. It's not required by the REPC. It's, it's advised. It's also, our buyer. The good news is if you sign your buyer due diligence, right, it right up at the front, it says, listen, here's all the things we don't do. These are things that we find normal, ordinary, prudent buyers should be looking at. And then it goes by category, right, including inspections. I think just as a good measure, it would be sending an email and saying, hey, I know we're coming up on our due diligence deadline and we talked about getting an inspection. If I understand correctly, you didn't want to have a home inspection. You didn't see the value in that even after we explained it. Is that correct? Man, that email goes a great distance. It goes a great distance. And you know what? Let's bring that question right back to this. If somebody had asked me a question on protected classes, that should be a flag for us. I don't mean panic, like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, but I'm going to make a mental note. Hey, James asked me a question about the religious composition of a neighborhood, right? And if that was the case, I'd be like, hey, James, I hope you weren't offended, right? You watch how I paint this picture here. I hope you weren't offended by me not being able to provide information about the makeup of the religions in the area, right? So I just made a positive.
Just looking for a wicked neighborhood.
But you see what I did there, right? I re-emphasized what I wanted to be captured in the paper trail, which was true, right? And then to be helpful and to encourage a response to that paper trail, I'd be like, but listen, I really do want to help in any way I can. Is there anything else I could help you with? Right? Because then he's going to, quote unquote, hopefully acknowledge, yeah, you know what? And in most cases, it's gonna be like, yeah, you know what? I was just reacting a little emotionally. It's not that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, yeah, you could help me with this, that, or the other. At least I made a declaration there that he confirmed back to me and I've got some paper trail. It's unfortunate we have to do that, right? But you know, you have to realize the time and the era that we're in, and you got to do things to make sure you're well documented, also known as protect yourself.
Matt, shouldn't the buyer due diligence checklist go a long way regarding the inspection issue?
Yes, and in fact, if you guys will humor me for a second, let me pull that up real quick because I want to share something with you on that. I think it's important. File open. Way too many windows open. There, here we go. Let's go. Nope. And you get to see my whole structure of my hard drive and how it doesn't make any sense except to me. Realty, RA, compliance, forms marked up, buyer due diligence. All right, so this will pop up on screen here in just a second. I highlight and I put in red box this opening paragraph, right? And it's not trivial. It's actually very important for us. So this is a declaration from us as the company. It's not just the company, it's you as an agent as well. Buyers advise the company and its agents are trained in the marketing of real estate, period. Neither the company nor its agents are trained or licensed to provide buyers with professional advice regarding the physical condition of any property or regarding legal or tax matters, period. Company and its agents strongly recommend that in connection with any offer to acquire the property, buyer retain the professional services of legal and or tax advisors, property inspectors, surveyors, other professionals to satisfy buyer as to any and all aspects of the physical and legal condition of the property. And then in all caps, buyers advised not to rely on the company or any agents of the company for a determination regarding the physical or legal condition of the property. So let's stop there for a second. That, when you talk to attorneys in the state of Utah, they lovingly refer to this as the get out of jail free document for realtors, unless. There's always an asterisk. And what is the unless? Anyone? Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we're on this call this morning. Unless you then start acting in contravention or opposite to what you just declared. D, if I told you, D, here's all the things that I am not, and it's your job to go and get your legal and physical condition experts and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I start saying to you, but you know what? Here's what I know about the tax consequences. Here's what I know about the 179 deduction. Here's what I know about blah, blah. You now have just destroyed your protection from the buyer due diligence. You can't declare, I'm not your professional and I will not be giving advice, and then turn around and give advice. Does that make sense? And so it's kind of like our fair housing questions as well. I'm not going to just leave you on a limb like, oh, I can't say anything about that. I can't talk about building and zoning. I don't know if you can do a ADU in this neighborhood. I don't know about whether you can rent or what the percentage of renters are in this condo complex. Those are legitimate questions that are going to come up, and we have to have an intelligent way of responding to them. And so, and maintain the protection here. Be like, hey, you know what? Just like when we started off, if we did a good job of explaining these documents at the front end, I would re-emphasize that. I'd be like, D, there's a lot of things I can help you with. But honestly, I don't work for Springville City. I don't know the exact code, but I know who to contact at the city. I know the phone number for building and zoning, right? Can we do that all day long, right? What about rentals of properties? Ooh, gosh, HOA, there's a good starting place. You know, that's where a lot of the questions come up. Or if it's an issue about ADUs, how many of you are familiar with the ADU policies in the cities that you predominantly operate in? Come on, raise your hands. Very few of you. It's a pretty important thing now, especially when it comes to affordability of homes. Dan, you represented a builder in the past. What was his shtick? What was his gimmick?
Yeah, and his gimmick was just the ADU thing and being able to afford a house and put it in there, and that they were the only ones that were designing a home that could fit an ADU and yada yada yada.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, if you're selling an $800,000 home, and most people, I'm just spitballing numbers here, could only afford a $600,000 home, if it came with an ADU in the bottom, right?
And
Officially,
you can afford a bigger house. Yeah.
you can afford a bigger house. And someday later on, you can kick the people out of the ADU and use it for yourself. So these are important things to know. But the point I want to drive home with the buyer due diligence is much like fair housing. You can't claim, I can't talk about fair housing issues. I can't talk about all of the things that are outlined in the buyer due diligence checklist. I can't help you with those things. And we all understand how to say that in the right, to frame that up the right way, and then start acting contrary to that. Keep your protection, right? Keep your protection. Don't get them to sign off on something and then act contrary to it, because you will just be seen as contradicting that in litigation and you will lose the protection. That is not coming from me, that's coming from attorneys. Okay. So the good news is, I know that sounded like a negative finish. I didn't mean this to be a negative finish. This is a reminder to you that we have great documents. We actually have great guidance if we just pay attention. And if we do a little bit of practicing, and remember what I started off with, always try and frame it in it, what's in it for me, not you, the agent, what's in it for me, your client, context, and it goes over so much better. But like James said, if all I do is say, well, I can't say this and I blah, 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 they're going to be like, well, why did I hire you? I mean, that's going to be the logical kind of sequence. Well, you're not very helpful. It's not mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There is middle ground where you can be like, hey, totally understand that. Maybe you could help me understand specifically what you're looking for, and I might be able to direct you to some sources. But if it crosses a threshold, just know I can't go there. Fair enough? Right? So much is in the words we use and the tonality we use and putting it in the context of what's in it for me and explaining that your offer may not even be looked at if you do things like this. But this takes the time. You cannot wait, and I know Dee knows this. You cannot wait till the moment in time and then think, oh, I'm going to come off really good when that situation comes up. That only happens if you've actually thought it through and perhaps even practiced a dialogue with somebody you know and trust and be like, did that come across right? Did you feel like I was doing it in the context of what's in it for you? Right? At the same time telling you I can't go past this threshold. Right? That's when you know you've dialed it in, right? And you'll see it in the people you talk with. They'll be like, oh yeah. And listen, don't tell me about the 3% of the population that is just crazy and no matter what you say is going to be belligerent. Not interested in that. Those people exist and good for them. But the vast majority of people, if you do it like we discussed on this call, if you ask questions, you build rapport, you put it into a context of what's in it for me, man, it's amazing how much you can navigate and you still come across as the hero.
Matt, this is James again. In my many years, I have probably at least 20 times had a seller say, I want to sell the house to a young family of particular religion because the congregation in this area really needs some youth. It's happened many times, and
Yep.
to your point, you need to be ready because the answer may be really obvious. You might be able to provide them with exactly what they want, but if it's also illegal.
Don't jump off the cliff. Right? Don't jump off. No matter how tempting it is, don't jump off the cliff. There are, I promise you, with just a little bit of practice. I mean, if you took the protected class list that we started this off with and thought of the top 2 questions in each of those categories and said, okay, how am I going to respond to those? And you went through that dialogue a few times and you wouldn't even break a sweat. You wouldn't even break a sweat. But to your point, James, you're right. They are going to come. If you haven't If you haven't had this experience yet, you haven't been in the business long enough. Because anybody who's been in for any amount of time has got at least one, if not several of these. And to your point, James, you're in it long enough, you're going to get at least 20, 30 times of significance. So stop sharing here. Listen, this is not always the most exciting, exotic part of these calls, but man, that's why I started off with the highest litigated things, right? Disclosure, agency, fair housing. These are the perennial favorites, and so it's important that we take the time on this call to not just remind ourselves to keep our nose clean, but also so that we do best by the people we're here to represent and keep them focused on truly what's most important, most significant, and not be dragged down, unintentionally dragged down a rabbit hole. I hope that makes sense to you guys. The good news is I can look at my screen and see the people on the call, and I'm very not worried by the people I see on the call. But even good practitioners occasionally, if they're not paying attention, if they haven't thought through these situations, can get tripped up. So make sure you do your due diligence.
Matt, can I also just add that I assume everybody knows that the state sends out people to attempt to catch you on mistakes. So
how many of you have ever had the call? A lot of times it's just a phone call. You have a listing and you get this call, and it's quite literal, like James said. It's like, well, how are the schools in the neighborhood? Is that a LDS community? I mean, they don't even disguise it that well. It just comes out blatant, and you answer the question wrong, you might find yourself in some jeopardy. So good reminder, James. Hey, listen, you're all great. Excited for this next 2 to 3 months. I hope you are as well. It's going to be a great time. Have a great Monday and the rest of the week, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Matt.